Hey guys, this is Christian Reuter, and today we're going to be walking you through our presentation on Nomis Solutions B, which is concerned with working with Ecar, which is an auto lending company. It's written by authors Omar Bespes, Daisho Chen, and Robert L. Phillips, and then it's presented by all those lovely people you see right there. So we've split it up into a few sections here. Introduction at the beginning, then we'll get moving into a little bit about Ecar, kind of their business model, and a little bit more information, kind of general overview of them. We have some visualizations of the data set that's provided in the article to help kind of aid in understanding that. And then we have explanations and recommendations towards the end, some reasoning for our conclusions, and a little bit about linear versus logistic regression, because that can be a little bit tricky. And then we end off with our conclusion and a few discussion questions.
A bit about loans and auto lending. Auto lendings are the businesses that provide the loans. Purchasers or borrowers who is interested in purchasing any new or used vehicles could request this loan. Once the borrower obtains the loan from the bank lenders, this will help secure the desired vehicle being purchased from any other buyers. There are three different channels of the loans in receiving the auto loan. First one is the direct loan, which is an in-person meeting with the purchaser and the bank lender to receive the loan. Indirect loan is through the finance and insurance of the dealership to negotiate a price based on the borrower's credit. And then lastly is the internet, which is just applying online for the loan.
Ecar business model and lending process. The Ecar business model was a pretty simple business model. The business model was to gather the information customers provide and use that information to decide whether to approve an individual for a loan, and if so, what APR to offer. Ecar specialized in online automotive lending. So you might be wondering, how does Ecar know what APR to offer? Ecar generally based its price quotes primarily on the following three criteria: loan term, loan type, and risk to the customer. Loan term being anywhere from 36 months to 72 months. Loan type being if the customer is refinancing or pulling out a new line of credit. And risk being each car had a risk band from 1 to 4 to help determine the risk of a potential customer. Once an applicant has been quoted a rate, he or she then chooses either to accept or reject the loan offer.
Customer data collected. E-commerce does require customers to fill out a loan application form in order for them to make their loan decisions. Some of the information they're asking for on the form is in regard to employment, income, residence, demographics, and loan amount. For employment, they'd like to know the customer's employer, how long they've been with their employer, the occupation they're in, and the city in which they work. For income, that covers information such as monthly income and other information such as stocks, bonds, property rental, etc. Residence is in regard to whether the customer owns their own home or if they rent. With demographics information is just the general demographics information: age, date of birth, name, address, social security card number. What it doesn't ask for is any insulting information such as race or gender or anything like that. And of course, they need to know the loan amount.
In this section, I will show you how Ecar collects information and determine APR rates for the customer. So what information Ecar need to collect when a customer applies for a loan? Well, Ecar will have the customer to fill in their name, social security number, address, also the make, the model, and the year of the car that they wish to purchase. Also, some of the financially related information will be required, such as monthly income, work stature, occupation of the applicant. After collecting data information, Ecar will proceed to determine whether to extend the credit and at what price. Firstly, to decide whether to extend the credit to the customer, the information that have been collected will be used to assess applicants' FICO score on a scale from 350 to 850. The higher score means less risky customer. In addition, the decision may not be based entirely on the FICO score. It also depends on the amount of money that the customer wants to borrow over the total value of the item. So for example, two customers with the same FICO score, let's say 650, and both wish to purchase the 30,000 car, Ecar will extend the credit for the customer who applied for 5,000 loan, but not for the one that applied for 15,000 loan. Next step, Ecar will determine APR rate. The rate will be based on three aspects. Firstly, is the term, which is the number of the month that the loan will be fully paid. In this case, Ecar uses 5 terms, which are 36, 48, 60, 66, and 72 months. Secondly, the rate will be based on the type of loan. So whether it's the new car or used car or the customer wants to do the refinance. And lastly is the risk band of the customer. After an estimation, Ecar will categorize the customer into 4 groups from 1 to 4, where 1 is the least risky and 4 is the most risky.
All right, so it's going to be really important for Nomis Solutions to provide value to Ecar because they're our first larger client and they're also a pilot for us per se. And again, I'm acting as if we are Nomis, but it's going to be really important for Nomis Solutions to provide value to them. And we can do that, or they can do that, by looking at the data provided by Ecar and determining if there's any pricing inefficiencies that are currently occurring in the way they set up their pricing currently. So we're really aiming to provide more value per loan closed by Ecar, and we'll go into that in a bit here. But a high-level flyover of the Ecar dataset before we start getting into visualizations and analysis. So the data set contained 208,085 records, and that was for approved applications ranging from December 1st to January 1st of 2002.
Hey everybody, this is Jeremy. I'll be presenting a couple of visualizations here today. So these were all done in Tableau. Right here we have a histogram. And on the bottom, we actually have a calculated field that was done in Tableau. From our data set, we have the competition rate, and then we have the rate that was actually offered. So I found the difference here, competition rate minus rate. So if we have a negative value, that indicates that our rate is actually higher than the competition rate. And if we have a positive value, that means our rate was lower than the competition rate. And you'll see that across our x-axis. It is split into 2 groups here. So on the left, we have loan offer rejected. And on the right, we have loan offer accepted. I just wanted to highlight some of the differences between them. As we can see, we have a better chance of them being accepted if they are at a positive value, especially you'll see when the graph is blue or the histogram is blue. That does indicate a new car loan. So you'll see in the loan offer rejected category, if it goes from negative 0.5 to about negative 8, there's a lot of blue over there. And then if we look in our loan offer accepted category from negative 0.5 to negative 11.5, there's barely any blue, which indicates that our new car types, if we have a worse rate than the competition, they very rarely get accepted. So that's probably our biggest area of growth. when looking at the actual values in Tableau, we have roughly a 5% chance of them being accepted if we have a negative value in this field, which indicates that our rate is higher than the competition rate. If we have a positive value in this field, we actually have about a 10% chance of them being accepted in the new car type. You will see in the refinance and used car types, those tend to be accepted even if we have a negative value in this field. And that indicates that our rate is actually higher than the competition rate. But that is something that we can use going forward. The biggest opportunity for growth that I see is these new car types because there are so many applications for them. This is obviously important because Ecar doesn't make any profit on a loan that's not accepted. So we want to increase the odds of that happening as much as possible. Here we have a second visualization. On the top, we have our loan offer rejected. On the bottom, we have loan offer accepted. And then across our x-axis, we actually have our term lengths for our loan. So these can be at 36 months, 48 months, 60 months, 66, and 72. It appears that our biggest opportunity for improvement is at 60 months and 72 months when you see how big those peaks are. And also just looking at this graph, we can see how much blue is up top on the loan offer rejected category, and that's a new car type loan. And then on the bottom in loan offer accepted, we barely see any blue at all. So that indicates that that's probably our biggest area for growth. It does appear that, more closer to equal is the refinance and used between accepted and rejected. Those looks like they have about a 50% acceptance rate, probably a little bit under. But the new cars, it seems like our acceptance rate there is pretty low. So we want to take a look at that and see if there's anything we can optimize for sure. So this is our third visualization. You'll see it's set up as a text table. On our left, we have our car type, so new, refinance, and used. And then on the right, we have our outcome for loan offer rejected and accepted. And these are just split up. They show us the average amount of each loan, the average rate, average cost of funds, and then the count from our data set. So if we were to look at the first line, our average amount of the loan for a loan offer rejected on a new car is $31,000. The rate is 5.3. Cost of funds is 1.35, and then there's about 110,000 of these points in our data set. So if we were to calculate profit on this and say another observation you can make, across the board our rates are higher in the rejected category than the accepted category, which is important because we want our loans to be accepted as much as possible. So hypothetically, say we were to lower our average rate offered even to the accepted category at 4.99. If we did the math on that, it would be 0.0499. This is how we calculate profit, by the way. The average rate minus the cost of funds, and multiply that by our average amount. That would bring us to about $1,133 per year. And obviously that's greater than zero. If our loan offer is rejected, we make $0. So in theory, we should be offering more competitive rates in order to get our loans accepted. So that's a big takeaway from this visualization as well. On the right, you'll see kind of the count of car type loans and the outcomes for them. So for a new car, our accepted were about 9,000, and then our rejected was almost 110,000. That's a huge area for growth. And our refinance and used, these are closer to 50-50. Obviously, they're not at 50-50, but they're more in that direction. So our biggest opportunity for growth is going to be these new car types, as we mentioned before.
So as previously stated, in order to provide value to Ecar, we're going to be looking to optimize their pricing strategy to ensure that we're getting the most value possible out of our efforts, or Ecar's efforts rather. So a couple key questions to consider as Nomis when we're trying to determine how can we add value to Ecar and get them more revenue is it better to have more loans accepted by our customers, or is it better to have loans with higher interest rates accepted? So the key to Ecar seeing value from Nomis is, again, so that they see additional profit as a result of the price optimization that Nomis is offering. And the way to do that is to get a higher net profit per loan quote per customer for the Ecar company. So what that means is, let's high level go over the process again. So Ecar makes a lot of loan quotes to applicants based on their application submitted. And then the customer, after receiving the quote, can either accept it or do nothing with it, but they have 45 days to make that decision. So it's also important to consider that when an APR or interest rate on a loan is high, Ecar makes more money on that specific loan, but it's less likely, because of the higher interest rate, that that loan will be accepted by a customer. And that's called the conversion rate, which is the probability that a customer will accept a loan. So rather than considering the revenue that Ecar gains per quote with a high APR or high interest loan, it's more important to consider the revenue that Ecar gains by putting out more loans with APRs or interest rates that have a higher conversion rate. So what that means essentially is, rather than having lots of loans or just X amount of loans going out with high APRs, where it's less likely that customers will accept them, we actually want to put more loans out with a more moderate interest rate so that more customers accept them, because that overall is going to boost the overall revenue and profit. So with that said, the metric we're looking to increase is the revenue per loan quote rather than the revenue per accepted quote. Again, we want more loans with more, I'm going to say, moderate or reasonable APRs going out so they can be accepted, rather than a smaller amount of loans with higher APRs because they're less likely to be accepted. So that's the overall goal. And we're going to do this with price optimization across all the loan quotes to increase the conversion rate, which will therefore increase the overall revenue and profit and provide Ecar with value from utilizing Nomis solutions. And it's going to give us a great review, as well as it's going to be a great pilot program moving forward.
Hey everybody, this is Jeremy. So how can we find out what prices would be more efficient? Obviously we've learned about linear regression before. If we were to think about applying that, there's a couple of big issues that would come up that we will discuss on the next slide. So what would be more appropriate is actually logistic regression, and that will all be explained next. So here we compare logistic regression with linear regression and determine why logistic regression is more appropriate for this data set. So logistic regression is more appropriate when we have a binary variable, a 0 or a 1. In this case, we are looking at, is the loan offer accepted, which would be a 1, or is the loan offer rejected, which would be a 0. So we're familiar with linear regression. We put in our parameters and a line's developed. The main issue with that, as you'll see on this image here as a demonstration, we have height versus weight, and then we're trying to predict the probability of obesity. I think this is in mice. But anyway, we see it crosses 1 and it crosses 0, and obviously we can't have a probability below 0 and above 1. So we could make all those points to the right of where it crosses 1 and all the x points to the left of x where it crosses 0 be 0 and be 1 accordingly. But that's not really appropriate because probabilities are rarely ever completely 0 and they're rarely ever completely 1. So the logistic regression is important because this sigmoid shape here allows us to approach 1 and allows us to approach 0. And that's why it's appropriate for this data set. Other than that, parameters are input and a model is developed similarly to how linear regression would be performed.
So what factors would play into the model that Nomis would implement for Ecar? Well, any factors that change or differ between the accepted and rejected groups are going to be taken into consideration. So the first of those would be the competitions rate and how it relates to or is different from the one that Ecar would offer. As the slide says, the higher rates don't really get accepted while the lower rates get accepted much more. Second would be the car type, as well as if it changes the competitions rate, That's the interaction. New car loans are rarely accepted if offered rate is higher than competition. Refinance and used car may be accepted if rate is higher. Basically, they might be able to offer higher rates for refinance and used cars. More factors: the previous rate if it's a refinance loan. Also, the FICO score, or the credit trustworthiness tier, will be taken into consideration. Another factor would be term length. As we saw earlier in the visualizations, the number of accepts versus rejects differs from term to term by quite a bit. Next factor, loan amount, and then also the partners that this loan is going through. Most of it's going to be directly from Ecar to the lender. And yeah, those are the factors that will play into the model. So, in conclusion, Ecar's pricing model could use some improvements. We pointed out some of the pricing inefficiencies, which lead to less accepts, which leads to less profit. We showed that there's value to be captured. A couple small examples of where Ecar could change their pricing, perhaps lower rates, which brings in more accepts, which brings in more profit, more value. But also Nomis' services can provide a solution for Ecar. With that adaptive pricing and logistic regression model, we can find the optimal parameters to get more accepts and bring in more profit. So, a couple discussion questions. What benefits would the improved logistic regression model offer? Well, obviously, more accepts, more loans, then more profit, also more customers, and then the cycle repeats, making the business larger and more profitable. Second discussion question, what would Nomis' next steps be? Say they showed this presentation or this information to Ecar, well then Ecar would have to make a decision potentially on, well, do they implement Nomis' pricing or not? If they say yes, then Nomis does a trial on part of Ecar's loans for a certain amount of time, and then they go back and compare the pricing between compare the profit between the regular pricing and the Nomis pricing, and potentially then implement Nomis across the whole business because Nomis is more profitable, most likely. So, and that's obviously hypothetical. That is what Nomis did for their first customer. But that was not Ecar. So yes, those are the discussion questions.